Hello and welcome back to Retfurb. So on today's video we got a set of Rockshox MAG 21 SL titanium forks that we're going to be going to give a complete overhaul to. So as you can see, they're in a little bit rough condition. They don't move that great at the moment either. So the first thing we need to do is just get the top caps off. So this is a 22mm bolt that holds those top caps in. So you just need to remove them and then we can drain the oil that's inside. So you can see that the exterior, these are a little bit rough. It's quite common for them to go like this. They've basically polished metal surface and then they're lacquered over the top with a gold sort of finish, although it looks quite sort of a dull gold finish at the moment because it's obviously aged. So we're going to rectify that and recoat them. And yeah, hopefully we can get them working all okay. I'm pretty optimistic about these. I think it's just dirty oil and they just haven't been used that well. And you can see there's not a hell of a lot of oil inside compared to what there should be. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll all be okay. So yeah, now on to 4mm Allen key, which is just to remove the crown off of the stanchions. So there's 2 bolts either side, and then we can pull out the stanchions, just being careful in the process of doing that you don't mark the stanchions as you're getting it out. And then we can remove the rubber boots. So these rubber boots won't be going back on. The person that I'm doing these for, he doesn't want the boots put back on there, so we'll just leave them off and show the stanchions, and they're actually in really good condition. And now to remove the seals. So there's 2 of these seals either side at the bottom of the stanchions, and I like to remove the metal ring that goes on the seals. I've had them before where I've tried to do it with them still in there and I've ended up damaging them, so I learned my lesson on that and remove it first. So these are a little bit different than most modern forks. Most modern forks you'd remove the stanchions out first and then the seals would come out, but with this there's a circlip in behind where the seals are, so you need to get the seals out. It's a bit of a stupid way of doing it, but obviously it's the way these forks were made. There's no bolts at the bottom of the legs like you'd get on a lot of the more modern forks, which would then allow it to be unbolted. So these are obviously done this way and held in place with these circlips I'm just pointing to there. So we need some circlip pliers to remove them. So again, you can just see there I'm pointing on this leg as well. That you can just about see the circlip inside. So just getting a set of circlip pliers. You need quite a sort of a thin end circlip pliers to get these out. I found that the holes in the circlip were quite small, so I had to sort of Dremel down the end of the circlip a little bit to get it in there. So now on to removing the brace. So you will have to put all this back together again in a minute, but just in the process of getting the circlip out, it was easier doing it this way. But to get the stanchions separated from the lower legs, you need to do it like this. You basically need to put it back together, put the crown back on, put the air caps back on, apply air into each side, and then what that'll do, that'll push off the lower legs. And when you do that, you need to make sure that you support the crown and the lower leg in the process. Obviously you're putting pressure in there and you don't want it going flying off, so you need to do it very carefully, and you'll see that as you're doing it, it should push it off. There is a specialist tool you can get. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I've heard there's a specialist tool to remove the bearings without doing that, but that is a lot easier way of doing it with just pushing the air back in. And then again, you know, you can take the stanchions back off like I have now and take all the bearings off. I'm going to give them a quick clean before I go any further, but I will clean them up again once I come to put them back together. But this is just an initial sort of clean as I'm stripping it down. And as I'm checking it all, I can see that everything's in really good condition, to be honest, despite the fact that they weren't moving very well. Like I said before, I think that's just the fact that it's old grease, old oil, sorry, and it hasn't been used probably for a while. These forks, they've probably been sat and they're just a bit sort of gunked up. And yeah, good service like this, and then the new oil, when that goes in there, that'll be, you know, a lot better, and they should hopefully move. Like I say, I'm pretty optimistic with these. I think they're going to come out really well. Aesthetically wise, you know, they look a bit rough. So on that note, moving on to the lower legs. So I'm just sanding off all the worst of the corrosion, just working down grades. So I'm going to go to start with quite coarse to get rid of some of the rough bits. I think I've got like 150 grade, and there's my dog again deciding he wants a cameo in the video. And just working around all the little bits. I don't really go into too much depth as I'm doing this, but you need to work it all the way down. I think I finished with something like 2,500 grade, because you will need to polish these up before you put the lacquer on, which I don't really like doing, because I always worry that they're going to peel, and that's exactly what happens with the first ones. And you see a lot of aluminium wheels and stuff like that are in the same sort of process where they're polished and they're lacquered over, and it never lasts that great. Yeah, you can see just how well they're polishing up now. I went over these a lot to get these polished up nicely. I probably would do it a little bit different next time. I found that every time I wiped over it with a cloth, it was leaving almost like microfiber marks, which wasn't really noticeable at this point, and it's only until I put the lacquer on you just see it underneath, and it was a bit annoying. Admittedly, it's probably quite hard to get rid of that 100%, because no matter what you do, you know, you wipe over paint and you leave like microfiber sort of hairline marks on it sometimes. So yeah, it was a little bit difficult, but I think I would go a little bit more, keep using new cloths maybe. I don't know, it was making it sound a lot worse than what it was, but it just annoyed me afterwards. But as you can see, I'm just putting the bearings and stanchion back in, and then pushing that all back in place. So you need something to knock this back in after all the refurb's done. Now this is totally random, but I used an old football pump and I cut the end off of it. It wasn't working anyway. Cut the end off it, and it's perfect size, luckily. So I used a rubber hammer, knock that back in, knock the bearing back in, and then once you've got that down into place, then you can get that circlip back in. Again, taking care when you're doing this, you don't want it to sort of spring off onto the stanchion, cause a chip or anything like that, or even worse, causing any other damage. And as you can see, that's back in there. And then exactly the same process on the other side, just using a bit of fork oil to oil up all the bearings and everything to put it back in, and then pushing that top bushing back in place. So I will leave a link also for where I got the gold dye for the lacquer on the lower legs. So basically all you do is you mix up your clear coat and you put this dye in with it. Obviously you've got to sort of check the ratios. You might, depending on how dark you want it, depending how many coats you put on, you need to sort of put a coat on, see how that looks, and then apply another one. I think I put 2 coats on this, 2 heavyish coats, and it came out, I think, quite a good finish, quite a good coverage. The only obviously thing I would say is you're putting it straight onto a polished surface, so it's not ideal, it's not keyed up. So if you're using these forks a lot, I'm not sure what the longevity would be on them. But I did spray a little bit of adhesion promoter on there, which was just a clear adhesion promoter. I'm hoping it'll help it a bit. So now back to the fit up. So you can see I'm just putting the stanchions back in, all the seals are back in place, and these stanchions just sit slightly proud when you put them in, probably about, I don't know, 3 mil, something like that, they sit above. So you just need to get that in place, and then we can put the Allen key bolts back in. So you can see they're starting to come together now. They look really good. They seem to be moving really well. Obviously I've got to put the fork oil in yet. So with the fork oil, you've got to measure it from the top when they're compressed. So it's 30 to 45 millimeter from the top, depending on the rider weight. I think I put 35. 35, you can see there I'm measuring, so I did 35, and when you've got a gauge like this, you can just push that in the end and then measure it that way, so when the oil's up to the bottom of that gauge, you've got it up to the right bit. So you're best off putting little bits at a time. I overfilled it at one point, and I had to get a little bit out. So the oil weight, again, depends on rider weight, but it's 5 to 8 weight, depending on the rider weight, like I say. So yeah, you need to just check what weight obviously you are, the person riding the bike. I went for middle of the road on this one, and it's exactly the same when you pressurize the forks. It's a 38 to 50 psi, again depending on rider weight. I can't remember off the top of my head what I put on here. I think it was something like 40 psi I think I put in there, but obviously not getting to that point as yet. I'm just still filling up the oil, just checking, so that side's all okay, and now doing the other side. And just checking the gauge and making sure it's all okay. So to remember is when it's compressed and you pump it a little bit and make sure that oil goes round, and check it, pump it a little bit, push it back down, then check it, if that makes sense. You don't want to obviously just put it in and decompress it, and then you'll find that it drops because it's sort of circling around the fork a little bit. I did some Marzocchi Z1s which are on the channel as well, and you have to pump them as you're doing it. It drops quite a lot on them. I didn't notice it's quite so much on these, but it's worth doing. And now I'm just putting the top caps back on, so the top air caps, and just screwing them back in place. Again, 22mm nut on those, and just doing them back up and locking them in place. So I decided for some unknown reason to use a set of adjustable spanners here instead of making it easy like I did at the beginning and using my socket. Now I'm just going to add pressure to the forks, adding air into each side. So what you will notice, if you pressurize them up to your, the pressure that say 40 psi, you do that, you take it out, you put it back in, you notice it drops. This is absolutely normal. It's not dropping, it's just the fact that when you're putting that needle in and out, the pressure comes out a little bit. So you just set it to the 40, take it out and leave it. I always like to check an air fork every time I use the bike. If I take it out, I just always check it before I go, make sure the air pressure's okay. So you can see now I'm just putting the new decals on. These weren't decals that I made, these were supplied with the forks. The guy that wanted me to do them, he supplied the decals, but I could have made them, obviously, I've done them before. So you can see I fitted these wet. The only reason I did these wet is because I was worried about sticking them on and off this surface just in case there was any adhesion issues. So I stuck them down wet. This allowed a little bit of error if you can move them around a little bit. Obviously now they're stuck down and I've squeegeed them down. And yeah, as you can see, that's it. They're all done. They come out really well. They work really well, really nice. The guy, he was really happy with them. You can see there just how well they've come out compared to what they looked before on the right hand side. So yeah, another successful refurb. I hope I've been in depth enough and showed exact process. If there's any questions or anyone needs any help or anything, as usual, just add comment and I'll get back to you and hopefully help out. Thanks for taking the time to watch the video. It's really appreciated. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.